Sina, welcome to the Z Learning Podcast. So glad to have you on.
Thank you so much, Dev. Really honored to be here.
Thank you so much. So, Sina, you're like a pioneer of putting the AI in voice. I think that's how you described yourself. Um, Maybe you could go into that a little bit, but before you do, actually, for my viewers, my listeners, who don't know, what's your day, like what's your day job? Like who are you in like under 1 minute?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Well, with regards to my day job, I guess my full-time role is in the medical tech industry. So I work for a company full-time, DeSoutter Medical. They're manufacturers and distributors, designers of medical devices used in surgical rooms. So power tools for cutting bone, shaping bone, etc., etc. And for them, it's kind of like a dual role. I do international sales management for Europe and Israel, but they sponsored me to do an MBA so that I could become an innovation manager and help manage aspects of their innovation pipeline. So we're now currently working on a surgical robotic system that we're looking to commercialize. So that's my full-time job in the medtech industry, a mixture of international sales and innovation management. But having done the MBA, I entered the world of voice technology and conversational AI. We spent a lot of time trying to learn about what are the future interfaces that we're going to have with our technologies? How are we going to communicate with the devices around us? We obviously know historically you had buttons, switches. We still have buttons and switches. Then it slowly evolved into touching, and we have touch screens. And the next interface, if you like, or the next step in the human-computer interaction is voice. And we set up, myself and some of the students on the MBA course, in 2017, we set up Vaice, which is it was a voice consultancy service going out to various brands, BBC, O2, Google, even Amazon, and advising some design principles for voice and conversation interfaces. And then we more recently evolved from being a consultancy service to having our own product, which is the e-learning work that we do, in that we're trying to produce content courses essentially on training UXers and UIers to enter the world of conversational AI. So those are the two main things: full-time medtech, part-time conversational AI.
Cool. So I know that we're going to be talking mostly about your voice tech and your course, but before we go into that, I just want to, you said you're the chief innovation manager at a med tech company. You sell surgical robotic products, or could you just go into that a little bit, because I think that's really fascinating. Are these like robot surgeons, or like what kind of cadavers that are just smart cadavers? That I'm sorry, not cadavers. What am I talking about?
We test on cadavers. We have to test on cadavers before they get launched. Oh yeah, cadavers have to be used in advance.
Right. So I'm saying, like, you have like a smart scalpel that you could by itself can what is it?
So the innovation role it's just innovation manager. It's at Vaice where I do chief innovation officer. But with regards to DeSoutter Medical, we haven't entered the robotic market yet. So we're working towards commercializing the product. We have the product. We're going through some work, clinical trials with it now. I can't say too much more than that, but we're essentially entering a market that is looking at improving hip replacements and knee replacements and shoulder replacements, bone replacements, joint replacements. They need more accuracy. They need more repeatability in accuracy as well. And obviously, if you're trying to get more accuracy and you're trying to get more repeatability, having an automated system that is rule-based and it knows and identifies how to do something many times and not deviate because of human error, such as tiredness, etc. A robot is very much a solution for that. So right now in operating rooms, you can get surgical robots that will perform the procedure whilst the surgeon is controlling it from another interface. So you have Intuitive Surgical, etc., who are, the leaders in that space. We're not looking to do that. We're looking to enhance and augment a certain feature within orthopedic surgery by providing a robotic tool to a surgeon that will make what he or she does a little bit more accurate and a little bit more repeatable. So no, robots walking around just yet.
Okay, very cool. My father's a surgeon, and I don't think he has much to worry about because I don't know, he'll probably be in the field, I don't know, 5, 10 years, whatever. But my brother-in-law is actually interested in surgery, and maybe he will work alongside a robot or use
He
some of
will.
this technology
He will.
yeah, no doubt. But it's interesting how you point out it will enhance, not replace. That's a
No.
big fear people have about automation, like in the food service industry. I mean, in certain industries like truck driving, I'm sure automation will replace, but not in most fields. Correct me if I'm wrong. Automation will actually, in some cases, create more jobs, and often will help people do their jobs better.
It's a very, very, very interesting area. I would say it depends on the industry. Historically, we've seen when new revolutions have occurred, industrial revolution and the technological revolution, other jobs come out of the fact that something new has arrived. So you may not have the same job, but there'll be a different job as a result of the new revolution. Automation generally has enhanced a lot of roles, but of course it's replaced a lot of roles as well. The only fear, but I would say less than fear, I would say the only challenge that needs to be addressed is the fact that historically, a lot of the technological revolutions, and by technology, I don't necessarily mean electrical. I mean an improvement in a process. The last time those revolutions have occurred, you had low-skilled workers going to work in other low-skilled jobs. So if someone was working in a farm, I don't like the term low-skilled, but that it's a textbook term. If someone was working in the farm, which was low-skilled work, they would then go and work in Walmart, which was another low-skilled work behind the counter. With this new automated revolution, there will not be low-skilled jobs because automation's first target will be low-skilled work. So then you have a lot of the theories by Sam Harris, Yuval Noah Harari, Robert Sapolsky, many others out there who are trying to determine, okay, so what do we do with the masses essentially that are low-skilled workers? And then you go into all interesting things such as living an virtual reality life and things like that. But I think that's the fear or the question mark over this new automated revolution. What do we do with all the low-skilled workers?
Yeah, that definitely is a big question, and I know different governments, different state, they're addressing this differently. It's a big conversation I think we're having in this country. And I'm not going to get political. One guy who really I think has made, I think on both sides, people recognize him as he's at least spoken the most about it in the United States, Andrew Yang.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so I think
I'm more of I'm not a political guy, but I would say I'm more, I like Republican things, I like Democratic things, but Andrew Yang, he really got the message out there with regards to UBI and many other things with regards to automation. So yeah, definitely a champion of his efforts.
Yeah, and so we'll see how that happens, because it's definitely like you said in history, when there's always times of upheaval when there's a massive industrial technological shift. So I mean, one lesson to anyone listening to this podcast is always think about how you could stay ahead of the market, how you can continue to adapt and innovate and make sure you're not left behind, and make sure that even if something seems lucrative right now, make sure it's still going to be around in 5-10 years. Think down the road. So Sina, let's talk about your Voice AI course. Now, for anyone listening, like my grandmother and others, AI is artificial intelligence. Sometimes we forget that all kinds of people listen to this podcast of all different technological savvy levels. So tell me a little bit about, you're talking about a future where our refrigerator is going to talk to us, or we're going to voice control all of our devices, which I know it's happening already. Some people live in homes where everything's smart already, right?
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit about the artificial intelligence factor.
Mhm.
What are you? How are you making voice controlled devices intelligent?
Great question. So AI in a nutshell, it sounds like a fancy buzzword, but it is what it says. It's artificial intelligence. It's essentially studying human intelligence and the human brain and trying to artificially mimic the neuronal activity and a lot of the other brain activity that produces intelligence. But of course, one of the benefits or concerns, depending on what side of the argument you sit on, about artificializing intelligence, if one could say such a thing, if that word even exists, is that it doesn't necessarily have the limits of a human brain. So how far can you go with it? But that's essentially what it is. It's trying to take the activity that produces intelligence in a human and computerizing that for the benefit of humanity, again, depending on what side of the argument you sit on. And with regards to voice technology and conversational AI, they're kind of umbrella terms. Conversational AI is the brain behind having a voice interaction with a device. So you've got these, popularized voice user interfaces such as Amazon Alexa or Google Home, also called the Hub. You've got Microsoft Cortana on your desktop, Apple Siri on your phone, which I know is a nightmare for most people. So what these do, these tap into the benefits of AI to allow humans to now interact and control their devices, but on your terms, on human terms. What do I mean? Historically, we've had to communicate with our devices and computers on their terms. If we wanted to communicate with a laptop, we'd have to use a QWERTY keyboard. Or if we wanted to communicate with a joystick, we had to, function via a joystick. Now we have the onus is on the voice assistant or the device, where we speak like we speak for millions of years, 100,000 years to be precise, when Homo sapiens began to speak. And the computer goes away and has to learn how to cope with our primal form of communication, which is speech. Our earliest memories are the things that we spoke. Memory and speech is heavily, heavily tethered. So now we're seeing these devices pop up where you're able to control them via your voice. Now, what we're trying to do, what we initially was consult brands on how can they utilize this new reality, which is a voice user interface, in improving their products, in communicating with their customers via the smart assistants that people have in their homes. And now we've created a course. It's been over a year now that it's available. It was originally on Udemy. Now it's on the Conversational Design Institute. And we're essentially training people on how to think of a voice world, in the sense that if you've got a product, if you're working in a business and you've got a product or a service, how can voice technology benefit it, not just for you, but for your customers? And that's the main core focus of our online course, and we're very excited to see the results of it.
Cool. All right. So let's get into that. This podcast, the e-learning podcast, we're all about e-learning and people trying to enhance their skills, remain competitive in an ever-changing job market by taking advantage of different skills-based learning. We've had many people on this podcast who are pioneering e-learning programs, either for students, K through 12 or whatever you call it in the UK, who are doing like math, English, reading, languages. We've had people on here who want to grow their skills, in like their workplace performance, learning new software, learning conflict resolution, management skills, soft and hard skills. Now, your course, the Conversation Design Institute, which will be linked in the show notes. Everyone check that out. Let's go into that. I want to clarify for those listening who may, I use the word skill just now in the sense of something you can learn to be better, in a given area. So not to confuse everyone, but we're a lot of us are familiar with these voice devices that can connect with other devices in your home, like Amazon Alexa and Google Home, the Echo, right? Um, I know that when Amazon Alexa first came out, I got very excited. I was using it. Most of my friends and family were like, I don't like that thing. It's spying on me. It's listening to my conversations. But Alexa, for example, has something called skills, which I would say are like apps.
It's an app. Exactly. It's an app.
It's an app. It's just like on your phone, you have different things that you can download. Some of them come with your phone. Other things you download that can do different skills that you need. So I use the word skills again. It's going to be confusing for some people.
That's what it's called. With Google, it's called actions. With Alexa, it's called skills, but it's essentially apps.
Exactly. And you say there's an app for that. Well, now there's an action or a skill for that, right? And
Indeed.
one thing that I'll admit I haven't followed it as much in the last couple of years, but it was I remember it being a little disappointed that, I found when I got my Alexa, I was playing with it and I was finding apps or skills for all these different companies and news organizations and things that I like that had different functions. And then it's sort of like there wasn't that much. And I had this
It fizzled out.
It fizzled out. And I had this idea back then, which I don't know if I'm ever going to execute on it, but maybe it'll be more, different kinds of people execute on this. But I was like, I have a marketing agency. Maybe I should help companies develop skills for Alexa or actions for Google Home. Like maybe I should help them or create content for these different, marketing, advertising content for these voice devices. It sounds like your course would help me a lot if I wanted to learn how to do that.
That's exactly it. But it looks beyond Amazon and Google in the sense that Amazon and Google can turn out being like the first computers. I mean, we don't even know the names of the first computers that were out, but they were introducing the concept of a computer to the world. And what Google and Amazon are doing with their respective devices is introducing voice user interfaces to the world. But I think we're going to see the evolution of these devices in a way that we can't see it today, where we see voice assistants as being this thing sitting in our home with very limited utility. But essentially, voice user interfaces could be integrated within the vast majority of our devices. It is not going to be the only interface. It is going to be like a microwave. When the microwave first came out, everyone thought, that's it, we don't need anything else in the kitchen. But actually, the microwave has a certain function for certain things. Some would argue it doesn't. A toaster has certain functions for certain things, but it's not there to replace all other, touch points, if you like, with cooking. Likewise, voice user interfaces are not there to replace all other interfaces. It's there to either enhance user interfaces or provide a different option for specific needs. So if you're looking to, do things that require high cognitive load, so things that, you need to spend a lot of time on to think about and analyze and visualize, a voice user interface is not good for that. But if it's simple, low involvement things where you've got low cognitive load or there's low economic risk or low emotional risk, you can voiceify that entity and put a voice interaction behind it. So what the course is trying to do is basically, you're a guy or a lady working for a company, and you've got products, you've got services, and you're trying to see how could I use this new interface beyond Amazon and Google to improve it. And what we try to do is take a step-by-step, e-learning experience, starting with what, why, voice, even in the first place, and then we move into how, and we develop it into more strategy and then design, and producing lots of frameworks, interviewing people from Nestle, BBC, etc., etc. So that's really the core of what we're trying to do with the course, entering the world of voice and conversational AI rather than fixating on the devices that frustrate a lot of us today, because a lot of companies, when they were producing these applications on these devices, they thought voice was going to be the cure for cancer. It was going to be the cure for everything. And I'm sure you've seen the hype curve, Gartner's hype curve, where you hit this hype piece and then suddenly, boom, you have these dropped expectations. So unfortunately, I think there were so many high expectations that just weren't met. But now voice is finding its utility in certain ways, and I think it will continue to do so.
Voice is finding its voice. Yes.
That's exactly it. Voice is finding its voice. That should be the name of the podcast.
Yeah, I was just thinking that. Yeah, so I mean, that's the thing with all things, whether it was computers, like apps and the whole tech revolution and e-commerce. It didn't all happen in one day. There was hype. There was the famous tech boom of the early thousands, and then the big crash. It comes in waves and stages. I think sometimes the innovative types, the tech types, they sometimes think like the change is happening tomorrow and it's going to be huge. And unfortunately, a lot of people lose money and a lot of things end up not working because the market just they don't understand it, or they're not ready to change the way they do things yet. And you've got to give it time. I remember, I mean, I'm sure you know Gary Vaynerchuk, he's a famous entrepreneur. He was going crazy about voice, talking about voice. But he was always, saw him talking at a voice conference telling people, you've got to realize it's not like right now, it's going to be in a few years, but you got to give the market some time, because sometimes you always want to be ahead of the curve, but when you're really ahead of the curve, like a little too early, you've got to realize that the money may take a while to come in. So
exactly. And look, there's behavior change, and whenever there's something that influences behavior change, it takes time. It's just how the world was created. But it's also important to remember that we are going to see more and more AI entities. Whether we understand it whether we like it or not, there are going to be robots. There are already, law books being developed on how we're going to deal with robots, whether they're going to be caring for people, helping out in different industries and different workplaces. They are at some point going to be autonomous. How are we going to be communicating with these robots? It'll be via voice. So today, when we think about voice assistants, these are very much just the babies of that will end up becoming a robot. They may start small and be in your living room, but these are the first steps into a fully fledged robotic population. And as crazy and as futuristic as that sounds, it's just where we're going towards. We're already seeing in hospitals, robotic systems caring for elderly and the vulnerable. We're seeing operations being carried out in Africa where they may not have, a specialist surgeon for some certain procedures, or in Asia or some parts of America, but they'll just log in somebody from France or Spain or Italy or the US or Israel or the Middle East, and they can perform the surgery from a distance. So this isn't automated yet, but when we have these robotic populations being automated, the way we're going to communicate with them is going to be via voice. So it makes sense for people to start getting familiarized with the concepts. And first and foremost, if you're a business person, basically identifying where the utility can be for your customer and for your business. And that's what we've been trying to do.
Very cool. And, definitely everyone who's interested in voice technology, in creating voice applications, or figuring out how they can utilize voice or create voice apps that will help promote their brand or business, should definitely look into your course. We've had a lot of people on this show who are instructional designers, people who create e-learning online courses. This course is for what you would call
UXers, user. It's anybody. It could be strategists. It could be marketers, it could be designers. I think it's pretty rounded, but we've probably got around 450 students right now, and they are from a variety from strategy, UX, UI, biz dev, and we've got CEOs also involved because they're trying to figure out where is this interface going and how can we stay in tune with it.
Right. It's important to stay ahead and know yourself. Like if you're a business owner, don't just outsource it. You got to learn these things to stay ahead of the curve. And I think the term I was looking for is conversational designer. This is like the
So
conversational
that's what
design.
you'll become. So that's what you'll become after the course. You become a voice strategist and conversational designer.
Exactly. So the Conversational Design Institute, it's grooming a whole new generation, maybe the first generation of conversational designers and conversational design strategists. It's interesting. I don't want to conflate too many things, but I know that when I think of voice, and most people think of voice, we're thinking like IoT, like Internet of Things. Like you said, the things we have now, like Alexa and Google Home, they're cute, but that's like the early stages. We're probably going to look at, just like when virtual reality comes out, we're going to look at having a physical device like a phone as sort of archaic, because we're going to have something like maybe contact lenses. I don't know. So we're gonna once we're really living in a voice world, that little thing, that little circle on your desk that lights up is going to look old fashioned. So a lot of people can't wrap their heads around that. But just kind of as a final thing on this, obviously anybody who's really interested in, especially I think it's especially for people from a UI UX background, or anyone who's who's interested in becoming a conversational designer knows this. But for someone, like right now we think of voice as like I talk and I get my my fireplace to go on, or I have a voice activated
microwave, the clock,
microwave, or dimming the lights.
Yeah.
When are we going to get to the point where like, I don't know, I can ask my toilet to like order more toilet paper, or like my fridge to order my beer.
They have it. They've had it for 2 years. They have voice controlled toilets.
Wow,
so they've got Alexa embedded within the toilet. I would say that the next step is actually making these voice assistants more emotionally intelligent. Right now, the voice assistants are high in IQ. You can ask it the most complicated mathematical equation and it will answer it for you. But if you want it to sense an emotion, or if you want it to, recommend something based on an emotion, or change its tone based on your emotion, it's very, very difficult.
But do I want an emotional connection with my dishwasher or my toilet?
Well, I don't know if it will be with your dishwasher or toilet, but with your voice assistant, it may be a separate entity, but it will be imbued within your dishwasher and your toilet. It will be with you wherever you go if you choose it to be. And ironically, the hardest things for a robot are the easiest things currently for a human. Sensing an emotion, maybe not for most of us, but I find it very difficult sometimes. Sensing emotion can be quite easy compared to the most complicated mathematical equation. Whereas for robots, obviously, it's the other way around. So I think the next step in voice user interfaces and conversational assistants is that they'll get to know you. They'll understand your preferences, whereby you don't even have to call upon it to do something. It will know at the right time what it is that you need and what it is that you want, whether it's ordering something, whether it's to tell you something, whether it's to sing you something and play a song. It will be much more automated in that sense, where it really does become like somebody that just knows you and your preferences in a freaky way or in a really cool way, again, depending on what side of the argument you're on.
Right. Some people, like a lot of people in my family, I know lots of people who are not, entrepreneur tech people. Some people are fearful that, what about my privacy? Where is this data going? And these are real conversations. They're definitely, and I know we don't have the time to cover all that now, but that's definitely raises questions. But I think also will make life a lot better. and more intuitive. And I think that voice, for anyone who thinks that voice is this like crazy new wave of the future, I think it's actually coming back full circle because it's actually more intuitive to use your voice. We have just been used to with the internet that we will type a search query, for example, on Google, or we will, until recently, all we had were blogs. Now we have videos and podcasts, but voice is more natural. Little children you don't start out your life by typing or writing. It's more natural to communicate with your voice. And now we're getting to a point where technology we're able to put that into technology so that our technological experiences reflect our more primal, intuitive experiences. I mean, can you just elaborate a little on that? Because I think you have a lot.
Yes, I think it's you're as you say in English, you're bang on. It's 100% right. There have been studies done showing how if you type a certain request and compare and monitor the brain activity and compare that to voice requesting that same request, the brain activity is much lower. So the cognitive load is much lower. Why? Because typing and texting, these are relatively recent phenomena in the grand development of humanity, whereas speech has been something that has been happening for quite a long time. We started with sounds and slowly developed language. So what we're seeing, as you said, is this full circle where we're going back to intuitive forms of communication. We've seen that happen, this humanization of the human-computer interaction, even with touchscreen. It was much easier to touch something than to type something because, again, touching, we've been doing that for a while as well. And I think it's going to continue going. It's not just going to stop at voice, where I think the most intuitive thing would just be what we think, where you can just enter a room and it thinks, okay, I want the light on, and then we'll just turn the light on. I don't have to say anything. That can get a little bit difficult because we sometimes think a million things at the same time, and we're like, yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And then how is the entity, the AI entity, going to, distinguish between white noise and what your actual request is? So that's a challenge in and of itself, but we're seeing that humanization occur in the human-computer interaction, and it will continue to do so. And I think voice is just another step, but a very exciting step and a very emotive step, because a lot of the other interactions, a lot of the other interfaces, they are not emotionally driven, whereas a voice is very emotionally driven. Tones and just male voice, female voice, angry, sad, happy, they can really dictate your emotions. So we're almost moving from a place of functionality, where a lot of the interfaces that was the criteria that a lot of interfaces were focusing on, and how functional it is, how quick it is, how efficient it is, of now actually pleasure seeking, and how something could be inducing pleasure in the user because they're listening to a voice. It's not just this cold screen that they're touching. So there's a lot of exciting things that come with the interface.
Fascinating. Yeah. And I feel like, this could be a whole long conversation. Definitely we'll have to have you back on. It sounds like you're at the forefront of helping to humanize technology. And like you said, a lot of our technology and robotics and all of these things, computers are high on IQ, and you're helping raise the bar for the EQ of our technology. I think it's also very smart from a business standpoint. I had another guest on here I ended up consulting with, who had a consulting company and then went the route. They developed a product in the form of a course. I think that's the right move. I think that this is an increasingly in demand skill, increasingly in demand in the market, and I think there's going to be a lot of intelligent, forward-thinking people who have probably, especially if they have a background in technology already, who should learn how to increase their abilities in the voice space and go into the voice space. Now you're a really busy guy. Before we finish this, you have your full-time job, like you mentioned. You have this side hustle of the Conversational Design Institute, voice technology. And I understand you have another passion project I think that's also an e-learning focused entity. Maybe you could go into that a little bit.
Absolutely. So, a lot of my work in life is influenced by, philosophical and religious frameworks to life. I don't see religion, philosophy, and business as being, separate entities. I think there's a lot of benefits from religion and philosophy that one can bring in their business and innovation and creativity roles. So myself and a good friend, Avi Garson, have set up essentially it's an e-learning platform for studying Jewish law, Jewish philosophy, Jewish history, understanding a lot about our heritage. It's called the Chabura, which literally translates as, the gathering. So it's essentially a virtual gathering of minds from all over the world. We have students from the UK to the US, Argentina, Brazil, Israel, and soon Dubai. And it's quite a broad church, ironically, of gathering of minds there to learn about all these different things to do with Jewish philosophy, because one of the foundational principles within Judaism is that the author of the world is the author of our approach to life and religious approaches to life, and it's very, very important to try and ensure that we don't see contradictions in them and take the best out of our religious frameworks and implement them in our everyday lives. So we're very proud about that, and we're very excited to have that continue going forward.
Yeah, it seems like an engaging community of scholars, and also, I know you have a course in the works and very impressive website, a journal, a scholarly journal. So you've got a lot of interesting and cool things on your plate in many different areas, and I really appreciate your time, and thank you
Uh,
so much for being on the Z Learning podcast. Really
Thank you.
appreciate having you
Thank you for
here.
having me, and thank you for providing this great service to all these various industries looking to stay up to date with e-learning and technology. So thank you.
Thank you.